great journal of China, Sun Tzu once said, you have to know yourself in order to win your battles with others. Similarly, it's very important for the startup firm that we have today, IRL, Inside Robotics Limited, to really understand her core competencies, her strengths, in order to create a happy ending for the company. And we think that very happy ending can be created for plus, minus, multiply strategy. A very good afternoon. My name is Fahmi. With me I have Matthew, Shuangwei, and Leonard, and we are from Apex Consulting. But before we move on, let's take a look at the business altogether. RL as a whole is built up of 4 building blocks, from observe all the way to predict. Taking a look at observe, RL believes in selling products such as computer vision systems and unmanned vehicle systems to really monitor surroundings for their end consumers. In the second tier, think. Third tier, visualize and predict, rest on this belief that RL is fantastic at mining data and extracting insights from the data done altogether, delivering rich information to the end consumers about what they can do with the data and how to better protect forests or the environment. What this means is that while RL does sell products to its end consumers, its core competency lies in its ability to harvest data, to mine data, to analyze data, and sell it with key and rich insights. So let's take a step back and look at the company. Where exactly are we at today? We have a strong product for wildlife protection, for wildfire protection. However, we want to adopt a decentralized business model when we enter into emerging economies, such as the adoption of SIs. And thirdly, we have limited support beyond China. But where exactly do we want to be? RL perceives itself to be a company that has the potential to actually achieve global presence. Also, it would like to build solutions with commercial value. And lastly, it would like to balance the interests of its stakeholders by balancing the interests of RL and stakeholders, leveraging its social capital, deploying resources to mobilize the company to go into new frontiers, and lastly, to arbitrage information, the whole idea of data. So what this means is that in order for us to transit from where we're at to where we want to be, it's important for IRL to overcome 3 key issues. Number 1, should it focus on its current offering or expand into new offerings such as other aspects beyond wildfire protection? Number 2, should it develop an installation and maintenance capability in order to provide quality assurance? And number 3, how exactly should it create a sustainable business model for the future? And this will allow the company to achieve its objective of contributing and building a critical infrastructure management industry for the entire world. So we give you our strategy, plus, minus, and multiply. For the plus strategy, it's all about improving sales opportunities by keeping true to our core competencies. This is done by diversifying our revenue production. Secondly, about minusing, it's about getting rid of barriers to new markets by providing quality assurance. And lastly, is to multiply our growth opportunities by entering new markets by picking up the right business model. So let's take a look at the plus strategy. Where exactly should we focus on? We have 4 options ahead of us: forestry, oil and gas, roads and bridges, and lastly, data analytics. Weighing these 4 options against 3 core criteria. Number 1, alignment of core competencies. Number 2 is ability to scale up. And lastly, is potential for growth. We've identified 2 opportunities for you. You should focus on forestry and data analytics. Why? Because your strength does not lie in providing products for oil and gas and road and bridges. Your strength lies in analyzing data, integrating this data into your system altogether. What this means is that it's very important for you to grow the forestry product offering to new markets, such as Australia and Malaysia, and it's also important for you to build a presence for data analytics. So what exactly is data analytics for your company? You have 3 core capabilities. Number 1, you have a really strong data application platform that is built out API, a platform that delivers results. Number 2, you have a proprietary representation tool called Insight Globe that is fantastic. And number 3, you are working currently with institutes in Hong Kong to build the future of big data, harvesting big data and yielding rich insights. And because of this, you can actually provide data analytics solutions to government and non-government agencies to provide them an understanding of how to better deal with different forms of crises. And this is a clear alignment with a company's core competencies of providing data to your consumers. So given the fact that we're going to focus on the forestry industry and also going to provide data analytics as a new form of revenue generation, which market should you focus on? We've identified few markets for your company altogether. But taking a look at these markets against 3 factors such as ease of entry, such as government support, institutional capabilities, opportunity, whether there is in fact a market for your products and you're offering and lastly potential uptake, we've identified 3 key markets for you. You will continue focusing on branding yourself in China, but you now focus on entering new markets such as Malaysia and Australia. Taking a look at Malaysia, we think that Malaysia is a fantastic opportunity for the forestry industry because Malaysia is one of the biggest oil plantation producers, and because of that, they have a vested interest in preventing wildfire. And this is a very opportunity that you must capture in order to move forward. That said, now Shuang Wei to walk you through our second strategy.
So one of the key issues that IRL actually has to address is the fact that by engaging local system integrators, known as SIs, the key risk that they face is providing quality assurance to their end users. So what we propose is that IRL should develop its in-house capabilities for installation and maintenance. And what it can actually achieve through this development is that it can improve the brand equity through a promise of quality and reliability, which is especially important for a new startup. So how exactly do we go about developing these capabilities? There's actually a 3-step process to it. The first step of it would be harnessing of the knowledge. Developing the knowledge that is related to installation and maintenance. And in order to achieve that, what IRL can do is to actually set up an internal IMM team, installation and maintenance team. This can be done through recruiting existing system integrators in the market or hiring of engineers from the industry. The second part of these development of capabilities would be to actually develop the training procedures itself. So what the IMM team has to do is that it has to actually develop standard operating procedures that all its system integrators will have to follow through. And there will actually be 2 main modules encompassed within this training materials, one of which is firstly the knowledge sharing. The very first point of contact with the system integrators to share with them what exactly are the standard operating procedures. And secondly would be the refresher modules. In the event that there are actually updates to the way that installation or maintenance has to be conducted, these system integrators have to be kept updated with new updates in the current market. And thirdly, once we have already trained these system integrators and they go on to do the installation and maintenance, how do we continue to ensure that quality is assured in the long run? The way to go about that is to have accountability reports. The ILM team will be developing KPIs to check that there is compliance with the KPIs through a quarterly monitoring system. So the key takeaway for this is that when we are able to institute a standardized protocol for quality, it allows us to constantly track that quality is being provided to the end users. And one of the key benefits of this model is that we are able to transfer these training materials when we enter into new markets and have to train up new system integrators. So the way that we will go about doing this execution of training is that we have to take into consideration that our needs and challenges in the emerging economies and the developing countries are different. In the emerging economies, because the institutions are underdeveloped, there are problems of bribery, we will still continue to engage the local SIs as they have close ties with the authorities. So what we will do is that the IM team can provide on-site training by going into these local markets and training up the system integrators in those markets. However, in the developed countries, we don't have the same problems that we face in the emerging markets due to the strong institutional capabilities in those countries. So we can bypass the need to engage local system integrators and actually just employ the use of our internal system integrators who will also undergo the same in-house training provided by the IMM team. And then as any startup company that wants to explore the opportunity of a market entry, there is a very crucial need to actually build up your manpower strength. And the way we'll go about this is firstly, we can actually implement an iHire program, which is an internal referral program where you compensate your internal staff for any referrals that they make to the company. So in the event that any of your current employees actually know of talented people within the industries, they can actually refer them to the management team and you can go out to hire these people. And what's the benefit of this strategy is that it's a relatively low-cost strategy because you don't have to do mass advertising, and you can actually leverage on the strong social networks and contacts that the current employees already have. The second way to go about employing people is to go through the campus outreach. What IRL can do is to actually send its recruitment team into specialized institutions to actually recruit the fresh graduates. So these institutions can be local institutions, it can be overseas institutions. For example, SUTD, it's a university that has a collaboration with MIT that actually develop capabilities in research and design for engineering. So what these strategy can offer is that it provides you a very wide outreach and will be able to ensure sustainable manpower supply as fresh grads are constantly being provided each year, and also is able to raise the company's profile among a new generation of people entering the industry. And lastly, of course, the company cannot miss the opportunity of also having constant job fairs or job advertising, and this is very important that through this means of attracting new talents into the company, you have to be able to provide attractive compensation for the expertise that these talents from the industry can actually provide. And IRL is able to do this because currently they are already able to provide a premium in terms of compensation for their employees. So the key takeaways for this is that in order to rapidly grow the strength of this manpower, IRL has to tap on an array of recruitment strategies to multiply the staff strength quickly. So moving on, we'll now take a look at how IRL can actually go about expanding to different markets.
Now that we have built strong internal business processes, how do we replicate this across different industries? The first thing that we have to recognize is that there's a dichotomy between emerging markets as well as developed markets, and a different business model must be adapted for these. If we can identify three key things: firstly, institutions; secondly, the interests; and lastly, the stakeholders involved. So in emerging markets, what you find is that it's a very fragmented and undeveloped institution, which means there's not very strong local governments, and each locality has its own rules and regulations. Their interest lies more in economical, and the stakeholders are more your business owners as well as your government agencies. On the other hand, developed countries tend to take a more, have a more strong and developed central government system. They're more environmentally conscious because they have the ability to now look beyond just profits. And last but not least, there's the involvement of the community, government agencies, as well as non-government organizations in this. What this means for IRL is that we need to adopt a customized market entry approach in approaching these two markets. As previously identified, the emerging market that we intend to enter is Malaysia. Now in Malaysia, the model that we adopt is one very similar to our model in China. This means using the system integrators for installation and maintenance, whereas IRL does networking with plantation owners as well as government forest agencies. This allows us to focus our efforts on upstream capabilities where we have strong experience in that area with our strong networks of contacts. And lastly, and secondly, the system integrators themselves have local knowledge of the plantations, of the government regulations, and are thus able to adapt our product accordingly to local restrictions. This affords IRL a low-cost, low-risk strategy in entering into emerging markets. On the other hand, looking at more developed markets, such as Australia, we see that there's a very strong focus on quality, and therefore IRL should handle the end-to-end customer experience. This includes getting installations, doing the installations for the government agencies, as well as getting endorsements from government agencies as a result, which will help us increase our global presence and build our branding. Now at the same time, IRL should work with the local communities as well as the NGOs, non-government organizations, since we have contacts in these areas, and work together with them to lobby government agencies in adopting our high-tech, low-cost strategy for their country. So our key focus here is on providing quality and to leverage off our NGO contacts into entering developed markets, because raising our international profile is key in order to target other developed markets. One key way that we can raise our international profile is through the use of NGO and lobbying. So what we want to do is to create a BBC documentary on the wildfires and their impact on our environment as well as on the community. Now, wildfires have a very large impact in the sense that not only are local communities impacted, as illustrated in cities such as Tasmania and New South Wales in Australia, but also the global impact because of haze, because of deforestation. And it's an increasing problem due to global warming in our society. And so we want to engage with documentary producers such as BBC to raise this international profile and show how IRL technology can be integrated into this system and mitigate against these disasters. Now this will help us to increase our company branding to illustrate how we can build an integrated, cost-effective solution for communities across the world, as well as we raise our international profile, and no longer are we on our own in trying to push out our marketing efforts, but instead we are getting international support and endorsements to push forward in the future. Now that we have multiplied our strategy, I'll hand the time over to Leonard, who will bring you through our financials.
Thank you, Matthew. So now we have to identify the four sources of growth of revenue in the future. So we have identified four sources. The first source is that of our existing recurring revenue with our SIs in China, because our contracts tend to be long-term based and the revenue keeps recurring year after year. Second source of revenue would be our market entry into Malaysia. Third source of revenue would be our market entry into Australia with high margins, where we reduce the need for SI in the developed markets. And lastly, our last source of revenue will come from our data analytics services, which we provide to big stakeholders and customers. Looking at the cost side of things, firstly, we'll expect to incur significant costs when we develop our installation and maintenance team, which is the I&M team, and this will cost approximately $200,000, which we have budgeted for, as well as our market entry to Malaysia and emerging market, which we have budgeted US $100,000 for. And thirdly, our market entry into Australia will require us to put a budget about $300,000 US, and increasing our manpower as well as our R&D capabilities in our company will budget an estimated $50,000 US. So all this adds up to an estimated US $650,000. Moving on to the prorated statement, you can see here that the EBITDA is forecasted to increase in 2013 from $178,000 US to about $920,000 by 2017. The reason for the low EBITDA in the first year is because we expect to see a majority of our costs being expensed in the first year. And the assumptions that we have made is that revenue grows at about 5% as well for the first 2 years and 10% thereafter. But all these revenue percentage growth are conservative estimates, considering that we're entering new markets and we are also expecting recurring revenues from our existing markets. Secondly, gross margins will increase from the current 50% to about an average of 55% due to our entry into Australia, and the payback period for the entire recommendation is 2 years. Moving on to the timeline where we'll deal with the financials as well as the financing portion of it. Firstly, we'll actually hire to establish our I&M team through the first year, as well as establishing our data analysis team in the first year. Afterwards, we'll continuously monitor and train our partner SIs in the emerging markets for the next 5 years. Secondly, our market entry into Australia will occur after we obtain our certifications and our patents in the first half of 2013. Afterwards, we'll continuously lobby with the various stakeholders and expand our market in Australia. For our market entry to Malaysia, we'll establish our new relationships with our partner SIs, and then we'll lobby with the stakeholders there, because we need to ensure that this is a continuous process, because stakeholders in emerging economies tend to be more difficult to lobby with. So we'll enter into market both Australia and Malaysia on the second half of 2013. Looking at the financing portion of things, we forecast that we need to raise $1 million US in the first year alone, where we'll offer a 40% share offering based on a US $7 million valuation of our company at that point in time. And in 2014-2015, we'll raise an additional $500,000, where we'll offer 6% share offering to the investor based on the $7.2 million US valuation of our company. After which, we do not foresee a need for any more cash, even though we might have an extended lifetime of $7 million, and we'll self-sustain our operations through our recurring earnings. Moving on to the next slide. Looking at some of the risks as well as the mitigations that we could possibly foresee, is that expansion in the markets might not be very successful. Hence, what we can do is to ensure that proper market research is done, as well as explore alternate markets. And we are unable to attract talent, and what we do is that we will post into job fairs as well as the internal referral schemes, which we have done. So without further ado, I shall pass the time to Fahmi to conclude our presentation.
RL is a company that started small and dreamt big. And in order for RL to achieve its end goal and great ambitious growth, we gave you the plus, minus, and multiply strategy. Plus allow you to add in a new revenue stream for your company. Minus allow you to build and remove barriers to entry by building quality assurance, installation, and maintenance capability. And multiply allows you to enter, multiply growth by entering to new markets by adopting strategic business models. This will allow you to achieve an EBITDA of 920K by 2017, delivering IRL's strong financial performance in the long run. We are Apex Consulting and are ready for your questions.
I have a question, which is, what do you think the risks are in targeting to develop your own installation and maintenance business in relation to Australia?
Well, we think, firstly, let's just address the need for the installation and maintenance business. We think it's very important for us to have that capability because it provides us a form of quality assurance. And that's needed if we want a long-term relationship with our end users. So I think that's really important. But the role of the I&M solution was really to address the growing concerns of entering emerging markets, quality assurance. And because of that, we don't see much risk coming attached with entering to Australia, given the fact that that capability has been built already. But that said, with regards to entering Australia, the biggest risk will come attached with our inability to obtain the certifications required for our products. But we think by lobbying support, that can be done quite extensively because looking at Australia, the country suffers from great wildfires, and our technology has been proven to provide fantastic results for our countries who use our solutions eventually.
And is that role one that is, do you think, a high cost, small number of people, high skill role? Or is it a large number of people, quite low skilled, therefore quite cheap role, and it's about saturating?
Now you're referring to the IAM?
Yeah, but developing your own workforce to go out and install and maintain. Is that
I think it would not be a very large team because basically what you need to harness, the type of knowledge you need to harness does not need to come from a huge source of manpower. You just need people who have experience in that particular field of work, which is system integrators, and they can actually share their best practices, and then you develop your in-house standard operating procedures that you would like your subsequent system integrators to follow. So that would not be a high-cost, high-skill team.
But taking a look at Australia, the developed market, we require a lot of manpower to build an IM team in Australia. We don't think so because Australia, they do have fantastic students or graduates with the necessary skills such as QUT, Queensland University of Technology, and we think there is already a pool of talent out there that we can just tap on in order for us to enter the new markets.
And where do you see the role of research and development in the development of this company going forward?
Once again, we think the role of R&D really rests in our ability to identify the core competency of our company, that is data mining and data analysis. So we think a lot of R&D will come from there. Like we didn't really cover our strategy, but if you look at it, our first strategy class, right, we provided a new business, our revenue stream, which is data analytics. Data analytics can be applied to other industries such as oil and gas, such as road and bridges. And with this data, we can actually build rapport with other industry players and hence build a form of quality assurance. And in the future, 5 years down the road, if we do decide to provide products to deal with these industries, the fact that we already built a presence in data analytics is an easy transition to the provision of that product altogether.
And at the same time, data offers us a competitive advantage because in the current system that we adopt, right, especially with the use of system integrators, we don't really touch base with our end consumers. So through the monitoring, back-end monitoring system, that is how exactly we are planning to keep our end users engaged in that sense. And therefore, because they adopt our platform and how our platform shows them the global, the larger picture, they'll be more inclined towards continually using our products.
I think adding on to what he said, our strategy really went back to understanding the birth of IRL. It was a company that was started by professors, by academics, and their vision was to really convert academic ideas to commercial solutions, viable commercial solutions. And we did just that by focusing on the issue of data.
But when you talk about data mining, of the two, the data mining, the analysis side, versus the actual pure technical skill of developing the kit, which do you think is more important for this company?
We think for the first 5 years, it's very important for us to focus on data first, because that's where we're good at, that's where we're strong at. And after that, we can then use our presence in the data field to enter the new industries. There's a very good reason for that. Looking at startups all around the world, a huge number of them fail because they seem to want to capture multiple shares in the pie. They're not focused, not simple. So we don't want RL to embark on the same mistake. We want RL to adopt a simple business model that is highly repeatable, that is highly scalable. And we think focusing on data, that other industries after 5 years is the way forward.
Thanks. I have a question. This is a fairly new company started in 2009, focused in one province of the country, based primarily on personal contacts. The question is, it seems that you want to expand in 3 markets simultaneously. Can you tell me a bit more about the risks you envisage there?
I think
for the risk as well as into market expansion, we have to categorize our market expansion into the emerging markets as well as the developed markets. For the emerging markets, we are actually entering the unknown territory, but with our expertise in the emerging markets. So we foresee that the risk is just finding the correct SI to partner with. So that in that sense, there should be multiple SIs in Malaysia alone already, and there are multiple stakeholders there as well. So with our expertise in partnering with the correct SIs, we believe the risk to entering emerging markets is minimal. For developed markets, we have to obtain the certification as well as the patents, and this will take a considerable amount of time, as shown in the timeline, where we took about half a year to obtain this certification as well as the patents. And the risk is that it might not be successful because the lobbying did not work, the governments did not work. But what we can do is to really minimize this risk by ensuring that our market entry plan is comprehensive, and that our go-to-market strategy is comprehensive, and that we do proper market research before that. So that's the risk for the developed markets. For the data analysis market, I will let Kwame.
I think the risk in the data analysis in our new revenue stream is the fact that people don't think we can provide great data analysis. And that really starts, and in order for us to mitigate that risk, we need to start leveraging our social capital and really show people that we do have the technology. In fact, Inside Globe is one of the best technology out there. So we really need to leverage our social capital to build rapport with new businesses to show that we are capable of providing data analysis upfront.
Linking to the same question, in terms of the speed of penetration, do you think you can achieve that quicker in Australia through partnering with other SIs rather than developing your own network? If you see the skill set as the data mining and the R&D skill set that's inherent in the business, therefore presumably the speed with which you get that data in and can refine your product offering is also important from a competitive landscape. Can you just talk about how you weighed up that speed to market in your decision?
I think because there's a necessity for us to build our in-house capabilities for us to tackle the emerging markets as well. And that's why we chose to adopt integrated model in that sense for the Australian side, because they will ensure that we can provide quality assurance to governments. And I think that that's one of their largest concerns. And we can't afford to, when we're entering into developed markets, we can't afford to give the image that we are just another Chinese company, Chinese startup. You know, we're going to go down there and try to find the most cost-efficient way of doing things, and that might result in a compromise on quality. If we want to build an international brand, if we want to go bigger than just emerging markets and target developed markets as well, I think it's very important that we go in from the start and go develop their capabilities, and then that will give us a more sustainable advantage over the longer term.
I have a question for you actually, which is that in your talk you talked about one of the reasons why you used an agency, an SI, to go into emerging markets is because of the corruption that's there. Would you therefore turn a blind eye to the corruption there? Would you seek to control the way that the SI that you contract with interacts with the government agencies who you're seeking work from? How are you going to handle that reputation issue?
I think it's true that we have to actually do something about corruption, as in we cannot blindly allow corruption to happen, as like you mentioned, would affect the reputation of the companies. I think that can actually be built into the KPIs when we talk about the accountability reports, ensuring that our system integrators, when they do their job, it's not just about being able to provide the technical expertise, but whether are they compliant with the rules and regulations that we have as well. This can also enter into our KPI for us to constantly track that we are actually keeping up with the rules and regulations of the countries, and are keeping up with the standards and quality that we want to promise to our end consumers.
To actually answer that question furthermore, what we actually see that a lot of our SIs do not engage in partake in the high value-added R&D activities. And this is where it gives us an edge, and this gives us bargaining power in enforcing the accountability reports as well.
I noted that you actually go into the very developed markets as well as the developing economies, more or less at the same time. how do you ensure that both of these markets, which are very different, the quality assurance level is being consistently sort of handled throughout the time period?
I think exactly the reason why we set up the INM team is to precisely address this problem of consistency and standardization. We have SOPs in place, and we have one team that is handling the training, so that every team of system integrators in each country is being trained under the same procedures, being trained by the same team. They go through the same checks, and they go through the same procedures. That's how we ensure consistency in all.
I think adding on to what Shuang just said, we really took a look at two factors. Choosing which business model we ought to use to enter the two new markets. We took a look at control versus responsiveness. Control is what freedom can we control the entire thing versus responsiveness. Taking a look at emerging markets, we think we achieve a nice trade-off between control and responsiveness, because people will still, the SIs in these markets will still be trained by our compliance team, our INM team. But looking at the developed markets, we think there's room for us to really build control together, to really build a brand for ourselves in a developed market, thus assisting our future growth in other markets down the road. So we think at the end of the day, it's very important for us to provide quality assurance in INM, because we are a startup firm that believes in protecting the environment, in providing answers towards crisis. And because of that, compliance and control is a huge element of startup business.
Can I ask about, obviously this is going to involve a big change in organisational structure from a kind of startup mode dominated by people kind of driven by very focused ideas, some of which are socially driven as well. How do you anticipate that change being managed from kind of a very small core team of people to something that requires lots more layers and processes?
We think the ability for us to manage manpower rests in the inherent culture of the company. Like what our recommendation suggests is that we are recruiting people, not just any technician, not just any engineering undergraduate out there, or graduate out there, but recruiting people who are passionate about transforming solutions into viable commercial ideas, into protecting from delivering results towards crisis. And we think that culture, that entrepreneurial drive, that culture to really find a new solution out there is what connects different people together. And we think that culture will be the one thing that helps us transit from a startup model to a commercial business eventually.
But pick up on the same question, there's three key people at the moment. Is those people going to do the recruitment themselves, or are they going to delegate that? And if they're delegating that, who's doing the search for the SIs in Malaysia? How are you going to divide up that crucial, very senior level resource to chase what are quite a few channels of development in a very short space of time?
Given that this is a startup, I think it's very important that we have to actually engage the three founders, because they are the ones who know exactly what's the aim that they have for the company and where they want the company to be. And even in their market expansion, when they go into each market, I'm sure they have their own ideas on how localized they want each team to be in each different market. But what's also important is that we have to actually also recruit perhaps a recruitment team, because the recruitment team, the core founders, they will provide the strategic portion of decision making. The recruitment team will do the plan execution. So recruitment strategies often involve quite a lot of execution work, because you have to determine exactly which avenues you're using. Even if you enter into the campus, you need people who are physically there to actually run out the execution of recruiting the people. So it will be a collaboration between the founders and the recruitment team to help them run out the execution.
In terms of roles that we envision, basically we see Albert focusing more on the developed market in Australia, because he has extensive work experience with NGOs, and therefore he can help to recruit NGOs onto our system and lobby towards the government. Whereas Kevin has more experience in the Asia Pacific market, and he has experience in like Malaysia and these countries. So we feel that he's better suited for heading the Malaysian market in that sense, in terms of networking with government officials, in terms of handling the operations in that area. Whereas the last founding member would then focus, because his key focus is on research and development, that's where he can focus on the area and head the R&D development in data analytics.
And in your recruitment drive, how important is equity, do you think, and sharing the upside? And when you ask that question, where against the equity that the founders obviously have, they've worked for very little in terms of cash remuneration for a long time. Their wealth is in the equity. And you're also asking shareholders to commit this year and again next year. So how are you going to weigh up the incentivization of your workforce versus the rights of the existing core equity group?
Okay. Currently, at the moment, we have about the shareholders combined, the 3 key founders, they control more than 50% of the company, with the rest of the individual investors making up the other portion of the equity of the company. And in 2013 and 2014, we'll be actually selling 21% of our equity to the outside people. And this will dilute the equity of the company, but we can possibly envision giving employees a benefit, incentive in the company to limit each incentive, each equity stake to about 2 or 1% per, about 1% per department or so, because we find that aligning their incentives with the company's incentive is also of paramount importance. So we will keep that as an option.